Most people think being smart means having the fastest answer. It doesn't. The person who truly outsmarts others is the one who stays calm, observes, and sees what's coming before it happens. If someone can predict your emotions, insecurities, and reactions, they can control the situation without ever controlling you directly. So forget winning arguments. Learn to control yourself, read the game, and think 3 moves ahead. Here are 5 rules that will change the way you handle people, pressure, conflict, and competition. The first person you need to outsmart is yourself. Before you try to understand other people, predict their behavior, or gain an advantage in any situation, you have to understand what controls you. Most people believe their biggest weakness is another person's intelligence, confidence, manipulation, or strategy. In reality, their biggest weakness is often their own emotional predictability. If someone can push one button and immediately control your mood, your words, your decisions, or your behavior, they don't need to be smarter than you. They simply need to know what triggers you. Think about how predictable people become when they are angry. Someone insults them and they respond instantly. Someone questions their intelligence and they begin defending themselves. Someone ignores them and they start chasing. Someone challenges their status and suddenly they need to prove themselves. These reactions may feel natural, but natural does not mean powerful. When your behavior can be triggered on command, you become easy to influence. Self-mastery begins with noticing these patterns without judging yourself for having them. You don't have to become emotionless. You have to become aware. Anger can be present without controlling your mouth. Fear can be present without controlling your decisions. Anxiety can be present without forcing you to seek immediate reassurance. Pride can be present without convincing you to prove yourself to someone who doesn't matter. The objective is not to eliminate emotion. The objective is to stop emotion from automatically becoming action. One of the most powerful habits you can develop is the pause. When something happens that immediately creates an emotional reaction, don't answer at the speed of the emotion. Slow everything down. Take a breath. Let the first impulse pass. Ask yourself what outcome you actually want. That tiny gap between stimulus and response can completely change the direction of an interaction. The person trying to provoke you expects the predictable version of you. When you don't give them that version, their strategy loses its effectiveness. Imagine someone deliberately disrespects you in front of a group. Your instinct may tell you that you have to respond immediately or people will think you're weak. But that assumption itself is a trap. You don't have to prove strength by reacting quickly. In many situations, reacting emotionally gives the other person exactly what they wanted. They wanted your attention. They wanted your emotional energy. They wanted to move you away from your original objective. If they can turn a calm person into an angry person with a few words, they have already gained influence. Real confidence is the ability to remain mentally stable while other people become unstable. When someone becomes aggressive, you don't have to match their aggression. When someone becomes impatient, you don't have to become impatient. When someone tries to rush your decision, you don't have to accept their timeline. When someone becomes emotional, you don't have to become emotional with them. Their state belongs to them. Your state belongs to you. This is also why you should become careful about seeking approval. The more you need someone to validate you, the more power they have over your behavior. If you need everyone to like you, criticism becomes a threat. If you need everyone to respect you, disrespect becomes unbearable. If you need someone to choose you, rejection becomes devastating. The need itself creates the vulnerability. When you become comfortable with the possibility of being misunderstood, rejected, criticized, or disliked, people lose many of the easiest ways to manipulate your behavior. You should also learn to recognize your own patterns. What makes you defensive? What makes you desperate? What makes you talk too much? What makes you reveal information you intended to keep private? What situations make you abandon your standards? What kind of person can make you lose your composure within seconds? These questions are uncomfortable because they reveal where your control disappears. Once you know those weaknesses, you can prepare for them. If you know criticism triggers you, practice listening to criticism without immediately defending yourself. If rejection makes you chase, practice allowing people to walk away without pursuing them. If pressure makes you make rushed decisions, create a personal rule that important decisions require time. If anger makes you speak recklessly, develop the discipline of delaying your response until your mind is clear. The goal is to become less predictable to your impulses. You should still be decisive, passionate, ambitious, and willing to stand up for yourself. But your actions should come from conscious choice rather than emotional reflex. When you master yourself, other people have fewer opportunities to move you without your permission. They can speak, provoke, pressure, criticize, praise, ignore, or challenge you, but none of those things automatically determine what you do next. And that is where your real advantage begins. Most people listen with one goal: to respond. They are waiting for their opportunity to speak, defend themselves, impress someone, correct someone, or tell their own story. That is why genuine listening is such a powerful advantage. When you stop trying to control the conversation and start collecting information, you begin noticing things that most people completely miss. Words become only one layer of communication. Tone, hesitation, repetition, emotional shifts, contradictions, and behavior begin telling you what someone may actually be thinking. Think about how much people reveal when they believe they are simply having a conversation. They talk about what they want, what frustrates them, what they fear, what they admire, what they cannot tolerate, and what they are trying to prove. They reveal their priorities without realizing it. They reveal what makes them defensive. They reveal which subjects make them excited and which ones make them uncomfortable. The mistake is assuming you need to interrogate someone to discover these things. You don't. Often, you simply need to stop talking long enough for them to reveal themselves. Silence is one of the most underrated tools in communication. When you become comfortable with silence, you stop feeling the need to fill every empty space. This changes the behavior of the person you're speaking with. They may continue explaining, they may add details they never intended to mention. They may correct themselves. They may reveal their real motivation after their first answer wasn't enough. People often become uncomfortable when there is silence, and that discomfort can make them continue talking. You don't have to pressure them. You simply allow the conversation to breathe. Instead of immediately challenging someone's statement, become curious about it. Ask what they mean. Ask how they reach that conclusion. Ask what makes the issue important to them. Then listen carefully. The purpose isn't to trap them. The purpose is to understand their internal map. Two people can look at the same situation and interpret it completely differently because their experiences, values, fears, and expectations are different. If you understand how someone interprets the world, you can communicate with them far more effectively. Pay attention to inconsistencies, but don't become obsessed with catching people in lies. A contradiction does not automatically mean deception. Sometimes people are uncertain. Sometimes they change their minds. Sometimes they simply communicate poorly. What matters is the pattern. If someone's words repeatedly conflict with their actions, the behavior deserves more weight. If someone says they value honesty but constantly hides important information, the pattern tells you more than the statement. If someone claims to respect boundaries but repeatedly ignores them, their behavior is the stronger signal. Watch what happens when the conversation changes direction. Someone may appear calm until a particular topic is mentioned. Their voice changes. Their answers become shorter. They suddenly become defensive. They begin explaining something you never accused them of. These moments can provide useful information. Again, don't jump immediately to conclusions. Simply notice. Observation without premature judgment is one of the foundations of good strategic thinking. You should also pay attention to what people don't say. Avoidance can be information. If someone answers every part of a question except the important part, notice it. If they repeatedly redirect conversations away from responsibility, notice it. If they become extremely detailed about minor points, but strangely vague about major ones, notice it. You are not trying to become suspicious of everyone. You are learning to recognize patterns instead of blindly accepting appearances. Another powerful habit is to separate someone's words from your emotional reaction to those words. If someone praises you, don't immediately assume they have good intentions. If someone criticizes you, don't automatically assume they are attacking you. Listen first. Evaluate later. Praise can contain useful feedback, manipulation, genuine appreciation, or simple politeness. Criticism can contain jealousy, hostility, valuable truth, or misunderstanding. Your job is not to accept or reject everything instantly. Your job is to gather enough information to make a better judgment. People also reveal themselves through repetition. Anyone can perform confidence for 5 minutes. Anyone can appear generous during a convenient moment. Anyone can say the right thing when there is something to gain. Patterns require consistency. Watch how someone treats people who cannot benefit them. Watch how they behave when they are frustrated. Watch what happens when they don't get what they want. Watch whether their promises survive inconvenience. Those moments often reveal far more than carefully chosen words. The more you listen, the less you need to force situations. You don't have to constantly prove that you're intelligent. You don't have to dominate conversations. You don't have to reveal everything about yourself just because someone is talking openly. You can remain engaged while keeping certain thoughts private. You can ask questions without exposing your own strategy. You can understand someone's position without immediately announcing your own. The person who speaks constantly gives information. The person who listens carefully collects it. Information creates options, and options create better decisions. When you listen without rushing to judge, defend, impress, or respond, you begin seeing the structure beneath the conversation, what people want, what they value, what they avoid, what they fear, what they repeatedly do, and what their words may be trying to hide, giving you a clearer picture of the person and the situation before you decide how to respond. One of the greatest forms of personal power is the ability to remain in control of yourself when someone else is trying to control your emotional state. Most people give away this power without realizing it. Someone says something insulting and they become angry. Someone ignores them and they become anxious. Someone threatens to leave and they become desperate. Someone challenges their intelligence and suddenly they feel the need to prove themselves. In each case, another person's behavior has taken control of their internal state. And once your emotions become predictable, your behavior becomes predictable. This doesn't mean you should stop feeling emotions. Emotions are information. Anger can tell you that a boundary may have been crossed. Fear can tell you that something feels uncertain. Disappointment can tell you that an expectation was not met. The problem begins when you allow the emotion to make the decision before you have had time to think. Feeling something is automatic. Acting on it is a choice. That small distinction separates emotional reaction from emotional control. Imagine someone deliberately provokes you during an argument. They raise their voice, insult your intelligence, question your character, and keep pushing because they want you to lose your composure. If you react exactly as they expect, they have gained something without winning a single argument. They have changed your behavior. They have moved your attention away from the real issue and toward defending your ego. Suddenly, you're no longer solving the problem. You're trying to prove that you're not weak, stupid, wrong, or insignificant. That is the trap. When someone tries to make you emotional, don't immediately ask, what should I say back? Ask, what are they trying to make me do? That question creates distance between you and the situation. Maybe they want you to become angry. Maybe they want you to reveal information. Maybe they want you to make a rushed decision. Maybe they want you to chase their approval. Maybe they simply want attention. Once you identify the behavior they are attempting to produce, you have a better chance of choosing whether to give it to them. One of the strongest habits you can develop is delaying your response. You don't need to answer every message immediately. You don't need to respond to every accusation. You don't need to defend yourself against every opinion. You don't need to correct every misunderstanding. Sometimes the most intelligent response is to wait until your emotional intensity has dropped. A decision made while angry often serves the anger rather than the objective. Pressure works because people confuse urgency with importance. Someone says, "Answer me right now." Someone demands an immediate explanation. Someone creates a false deadline. Your nervous system interprets the pressure as a signal that something must happen immediately. But not every demand deserves immediate obedience. You can slow the interaction down. You can say that you need time. You can ask for more information. You can refuse to make a decision while emotionally activated. This is particularly important when someone knows exactly what triggers you. If a person repeatedly brings up the same subject because they know it makes you angry, recognize the pattern. If someone uses silence because they know you will chase them, recognize the pattern. If someone threatens rejection because they know you fear losing them, recognize the pattern. Once you see the pattern, you can stop responding automatically. Your emotional independence becomes even more important when you depend heavily on someone's approval. If your self-worth depends on another person's opinion, they automatically gain influence over you. A compliment can make you feel powerful, while criticism can destroy your confidence. Attention can make you feel secure, while distance can make you panic. You become trapped in a cycle where your emotional state is constantly being adjusted by external events. The solution is not pretending that you don't care about anyone. The solution is building a stronger internal foundation. Know what you believe. Know what standards you live by. Know what behavior you will accept and what behavior you will walk away from. When these things are clear, other people's reactions become information rather than commands. Someone can dislike you without proving that you are worthless. Someone can criticize you without proving that you are wrong. Someone can reject you without proving that you are unworthy. Someone can misunderstand you without requiring you to spend hours convincing them. Once you understand this, you become much harder to destabilize. Calmness is also a communication signal. When everyone else becomes frantic and you remain composed, you create space for better thinking. You notice details. You hear what is actually being said. You recognize opportunities that emotional people miss. You can choose your words carefully instead of throwing words into the situation simply because you feel pressure to respond. This is why emotional control should never be confused with weakness. Weakness is allowing another person to determine your behavior through provocation. Control is being able to feel the pressure without becoming controlled by it. You can be firm without being explosive. You can be assertive without being aggressive. You can walk away without needing to announce that you're walking away. You can protect your boundaries without turning every boundary violation into a dramatic confrontation. The strongest person in an interaction is not necessarily the loudest person. It is often the person who can maintain clarity while everyone else is losing it. When you refuse to let anger choose your words, fear choose your decisions, insecurity choose your behavior, or desperation choose your relationships, you take back control of the only thing you can truly command, your own response, your own attention, and the direction you choose to move in next. Most people make decisions based on what is happening right now. Someone says something, they respond. A problem appears, they react. An opportunity appears, they rush toward it. Someone challenges them. They defend themselves. They are constantly responding to the present without considering what their response will create 5 minutes, 5 days, or 5 years later. This is why strategic thinking is so powerful. It forces you to look beyond the immediate moment and consider the chain of consequences that follows every important decision. Thinking 2 moves ahead does not mean predicting the future perfectly. Nobody can do that. It means developing the habit of asking what happens next. Before you make a decision, consider the likely reaction. Before you speak, consider how your words might change the situation. Before you accept an offer, consider what accepting it will require from you later. Before you enter a conflict, consider what happens if the other person refuses to back down. The goal is not to become paranoid. The goal is to stop acting as though your decisions exist in isolation. Imagine someone insults you publicly. Your first instinct may be to respond immediately because you want to protect your reputation. But before reacting, consider the second move. If you insult them back, what happens next? They may escalate. You may create a larger argument. Other people may become involved. The original issue may disappear beneath a battle of egos. What looked like a small moment can become a long-term problem. But if you remain calm, address the situation strategically, or decide that the comment does not deserve your energy, you preserve options. This principle applies to opportunities as well. Something can look attractive because of what it gives you immediately while creating hidden costs later. A quick financial gain may create obligations. A new relationship may require sacrifices you didn't anticipate. A public argument may gain you attention while damaging your reputation. A rushed agreement may solve today's problem while limiting your freedom tomorrow. The intelligent question is not simply, what do I get? It is, what does this decision create? People often underestimate the power of timing. They believe that if something needs to be done, it must be done immediately. But urgency can distort judgment. When someone pressures you to decide quickly, your attention narrows. You focus on avoiding immediate discomfort rather than evaluating long-term consequences. This is why the ability to pause is so valuable. You don't have to reject the opportunity. You don't have to accept it. You can create time to think. A simple habit can change your decision-making. Before important actions, ask yourself 3 questions. What happens if I do this? What happens if I don't? What is the most likely response from the other side? These questions force your mind beyond the first move. They also reveal possibilities that emotion tends to hide. Suppose you want to confront someone about their behavior. You may believe confrontation will solve the problem, but think 1 move ahead. How are they likely to respond? Will they accept responsibility? Will they become defensive? Will they attack you? Will they change temporarily and return to the same behavior later? Once you consider these possibilities, you can choose a better strategy. Maybe the conversation is necessary. Maybe a boundary is better. Maybe distance is more effective than another argument. Strategic people also understand that information has timing. You don't need to reveal every thought the moment you have it. Sometimes sharing too much too early reduces your options. If you announce your entire plan before it is developed, other people can react to it before you're ready. If you explain every motivation behind your decision, you may give others unnecessary information. This does not mean being deceptive. It means understanding that communication has consequences and that timing matters. Another important part of thinking ahead is avoiding unnecessary commitments. Every promise creates an obligation. Every agreement creates expectations. Every public statement can become something people remember later. Before saying yes, consider what your future self will have to carry. Before making a promise during an emotional moment, consider whether you will still want to keep it when the emotion disappears. You should also think about how your reputation compounds. One emotional outburst may seem insignificant, but repeated emotional behavior creates a pattern. One broken promise may be forgiven, but repeated unreliability changes how people perceive you. One impulsive decision may not matter, but a lifetime of impulsive decisions eventually becomes your identity. Thinking 2 moves ahead means understanding that today's behavior contributes to tomorrow's reputation. The same principle works in relationships. Don't judge someone only by how they treat you when everything is going well. Think about how they behave when frustrated, disappointed, or denied something they want. Those situations reveal patterns that become important later. A person who handles small disagreements with respect is more likely to be manageable during major conflict than someone who becomes destructive whenever they don't get their way. The strongest strategic position is the one that gives you choices. Keep your skills growing. Maintain financial and emotional independence. Build multiple sources of opportunity. Don't allow one person, one job, one relationship, or one decision to become the only path available to you. The more options you have, the less pressure you feel to accept the first outcome placed in front of you. When you begin thinking 2 moves ahead, you stop being impressed by immediate victories. You start looking for sustainable advantages. You understand that sometimes the smartest response is slower, quieter, and less satisfying in the moment. You don't need to win every exchange. You need to make decisions that leave you stronger, freer, and better positioned for whatever happens next. Because the person who sees only the current move is reacting to the game, while the person who considers the next moves is already preparing for the consequences. The final rule is to build so much genuine value that you no longer need to chase power, attention, approval, or control. Many people spend their lives trying to look powerful instead of becoming powerful in ways that actually matter. They want to appear confident, respected, important, mysterious, or intimidating. But appearance is fragile. The moment circumstances change, the performance collapses. Real influence comes from what you can consistently bring to a situation. Competence, discipline, judgment, reliability, independence, and the ability to remain useful when conditions become difficult. Think about the difference between someone who demands respect and someone who naturally earns it. The first person constantly reminds everyone of their importance. They need recognition. They need people to acknowledge their authority. They become frustrated when they aren't included, praised, or obeyed. The second person doesn't need to announce their value because their actions repeatedly demonstrate it. They solve problems. They keep their word. They remain composed under pressure. They know what they are doing. They don't need to convince everyone because results speak more clearly than explanations. This is why competence is one of the strongest forms of personal power. When you become genuinely good at something valuable, you become less dependent on other people's approval. You don't have to tell everyone you're capable. Your work demonstrates it. You don't have to argue that you're disciplined. Your habits demonstrate it. You don't have to demand trust. Your consistency earns it over time. The goal is not to become indispensable to everyone. That can create another form of dependence. The goal is to become capable enough that you can stand on your own. There is a major difference between being valuable and being desperate to be needed. A person who needs everyone to depend on them may tolerate unhealthy situations simply because they fear becoming unnecessary. Real independence means you can contribute without needing control in return. The more dependent you are on one person's attention, one person's approval, or one person's acceptance, the more emotional leverage that person has over you. If your entire sense of worth depends on someone choosing you, their rejection becomes devastating. If your confidence depends on constant praise, criticism becomes threatening. If your identity depends on being admired, being ignored feels like an attack. This is why building internal value is so important. Develop skills that cannot be taken away easily. Learn how to communicate. Learn how to solve problems. Learn how to manage your time. Learn how to think critically. Learn how to make decisions without needing constant reassurance. Develop the ability to adapt when circumstances change. Every skill you build gives you another layer of independence. But value isn't only about professional competence. Character matters. If people know that your word means something, your reputation becomes an asset. If you consistently arrive when you say you will, complete what you promise, and take responsibility when you make mistakes, people begin trusting your behavior. Trust compounds. It takes time to build, but once established, it can create opportunities that raw talent alone cannot produce. You should also become selective with your attention. Not everyone deserves access to your energy. Not every disagreement deserves a response. Not every criticism deserves an explanation. Not every person who walks away needs to be chased. When you constantly chase attention, you communicate that your attention is cheap. When you protect your time and energy, you become more deliberate about where you invest yourself. This doesn't mean pretending to be unavailable. Artificial distance is not the same thing as independence. Playing games, deliberately ignoring people, or withholding attention simply to create insecurity is still a form of dependence because your behavior is being organized around getting a reaction. True independence is quieter. You respond when you genuinely want to respond. You help when you genuinely choose to help. You walk away when a situation violates your standards. Your decisions come from principles rather than the need to control how others perceive you. Another important part of building value is accepting that not everyone will recognize it. This is difficult for people who are constantly seeking validation. You can do excellent work and still be criticized. You can treat someone well and still be rejected. You can make the right decision and still be misunderstood. If you require universal approval before you trust yourself, you will constantly surrender your judgment to other people. You don't need everyone to understand you. You need enough self-awareness to know why you make your decisions. Listen to criticism, but evaluate it. Accept useful feedback without allowing every opinion to rewrite your identity. Sometimes criticism reveals a weakness you need to correct. Sometimes it reveals someone else's expectations. Your responsibility is to distinguish between the two. There is also power in becoming comfortable with walking away. When you know you can leave a bad deal, a toxic interaction, an unhealthy environment, or an unproductive argument, you become less vulnerable to pressure. You don't need to win every negotiation because you are not terrified of losing one. You don't need to convince everyone to stay because you know your life can continue without them. You don't need to cling to every opportunity because you are capable of creating new ones. This is where real confidence begins. Confidence is not believing that you will always win. It is knowing that you can handle the consequences if you don't. It is knowing that rejection won't destroy you, criticism won't define you, failure won't end you, and uncertainty won't force you into desperate decisions. Build yourself until your choices come from abundance rather than fear. Build knowledge so you can recognize opportunities. Build discipline so you can follow through. Build character so people can trust you. Build independence so you can walk away when necessary. Build patience so you don't sacrifice your future for an immediate reward. When you stop chasing power and start building real value, your behavior changes naturally. You speak with less desperation. You make decisions with more clarity. You stop trying to impress everyone. You become selective about where you invest your time. You become less vulnerable to manipulation because your identity isn't dependent on someone else's reaction. And that is the deeper meaning of total dominance. Not controlling everyone around you, but developing enough self-command, competence, and independence that other people's approval is no longer required for you to move forward. When you become valuable, disciplined, and internally secure, you don't need to demand respect, chase attention, or force influence. Your consistency, capability, and self-respect begin speaking for you.